You know, when you sent over this sociologist, Enrico Aureli's work on Argentina, one phrase really stuck with me, pressure cooker. But he's not talking about the usual economic indicators or even the political dramas. It's like way more unsettling. This idea of social implosion. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, he's drawing on some pretty intense research,
Yeah.
especially Bartolotta and Gago's work. They argue that extreme stress, like what Argentina's going through, can actually make societies kind of collapse inward.
And Argentina right now, with the new government, the economic swings, it definitely feels like a lot of pressure. But what does this implosion actually look like on the ground? Is it like things literally falling apart?
It is, but not always in these big dramatic ways you can see. Aureli uses this term, engoramiento. Imagine like a reflex to danger.
Okay.
If you're constantly afraid, economically, socially, you start pulling away from anything that feels risky, you hold tight to what little you've got, and suddenly everyone's suspicious.
So instead of mass protests, which, we've seen in Argentina before, this is more like each person shrinking their own world just to get by.
Exactly. Trust erodes. Right. You
Mm.
might not rely on your neighbors as much or go to those community events. Even social services. They start feeling like a risk more than a help because you're afraid of being labeled, singled out.
It's like your world just keeps getting smaller and smaller.
And your energy all goes into just surviving.
And Aureli's point is this isn't accidental. The government is practically encouraging this, right?
All right.
Instead of people exploding outward in anger, they're creating a society too afraid, too exhausted even to fight back.
Yeah, it's a strategy. Like one of their new policies requires community groups to report anyone suspected of being anti-government just to get basic resources.
Wow.
It creates this climate of fear, even in places that used to be safe havens. You're always looking over your shoulder.
So it's like this vicious cycle. The government creates fear, people retreat to survive, and then that retreat is used to justify even more control.
Exactly. It's a chilling pattern. And honestly, it's easy to feel overwhelmed when you see it happening. In Argentina, or frankly, in a lot of places these days.
That's where I struggle with this. Because if this implosion is happening so quietly, so personally, how do you even fight it? It's not like you can have a protest against fear, you know?
Right, right. The usual ways we think about resistance, the big public things, they don't always work so well here.
Which is where that idea of quiet resistance comes in, right? The stuff that's harder to track, harder to measure, but maybe even more important in the long run.
Absolutely. See, Aureli's point is, even under this incredible pressure, you still see amazing resilience. People find ways to help each other, to create little pockets of safety, even when the big systems fail them.
Like those soup kitchens he mentions, it's not just about the food, right? It's about people coming together when things are falling apart around them.
Exactly. He talks about the 2001 crisis, right?
Yeah.
And how those informal networks, people sharing what little food they had, it became about way more than just not going hungry.
Yeah, yeah.
It was connection, sharing resources, rebuilding that trust that the government had been grinding down. It was like pushing back against the engordamiento, right? By creating a space where people could be together again.
So by creating these tiny acts of resistance, these little bits of defiance and helping each other, they were rebuilding something new from the ground up.
I love that. Because it's not just surviving, it's creating, right? These networks, these quiet acts, they might seem small, but they can grow into something truly transformative.
It's almost like by pushing people so far, the government accidentally created a whole different kind of revolution, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
the one they're watching for with the big speeches and the hashtags, but something real happening in kitchens and community centers all over Argentina.
And that's what makes these small acts of resistance so important to understand, right? It challenges how we think about change happening. We're always looking for the big, splashy stuff. But sometimes the most profound shifts are happening person to person.
It makes you wonder, are those empowered even aware of this? So focused on control, do they miss the real story?
Exactly. And that's what I think is so powerful about Aureli's analysis. He's not just pointing out a problem, it's a call to action. We need to change how we see progress. It's not always about tearing down the system, but about strengthening what connects us, right?
So for someone listening right now in Argentina, feeling that pressure, that uncertainty, what can they do? What's the takeaway?
Look around. I guarantee these little acts of resistance, they're already there. Could be a neighbor with extra tomatoes from their garden, some parents making an after-school program when the funding got cut,
Yeah.
even just checking in on an older neighbor who's alone.
It's about realizing that even small acts of kindness, of solidarity, those can be incredibly powerful, especially when we all do them.
Exactly. Who knows? Maybe those little things multiplied 1,000 times over become the path forward, something more resilient, more just,
Yeah.
more hopeful.
It's a good reminder that even facing something as bleak as social implosion, there's still room for us to act, for hope, for that quiet revolution that starts with each of us. Thanks for diving deep into this with us today.